Hey, everybody out there in YouTube land. This is your T-shirted historian coming at you live from the interwebs. And I'm here with my co-host, Grim.
Who is coming undead from the internet.
All right. And speaking of undead, man, hey, you got some news for us on Indiegogo today. You put out Wightchester.
Yep. It'll be crowdfunding for 2 months. I wanted to make it 3, but they have a limit of 60 days. So, yeah, get in if you want a cheap copy of a massive city crawl full of undead.
Yep. And just to kind of tickle you guys a little bit, I've got some footage from Grim's video on that. So I'm going to go ahead and share that out. Oh, let me see. Eventually. Yes. Nothing ever works the way we want it to, right?
No, that's a rule of streaming. Oh, no sound.
Can we hear the sound?
No sound.
No sound? Well, that's no good then. Well, okay then. Maybe if we share it through your screen.
Right. Maybe. Hang on.
Okay. I don't know why it never shares audio through mine. Probably because I'm not using Chrome, and I hate Chrome. But.
Okay.
Hey, Brightest, it's good to see you out there. Okay, while Grim is getting that put together, yeah, today is the Q&A episode where I'm hoping you guys in the audience will ask us some burning questions that you have for the role-playing stuff. No matter what TTRPG it is, generally you can kind of default answers on a few things. So, I hope you'll hit us up with your questions. I have a tiny bit of a rant this morning. I've had an ongoing feud happening this weekend with other people on Twitter, and I know most people would tell you, it's like, your first mistake was getting involved into a feud with somebody on Twitter. I know. I couldn't help myself, though. It's about fudging dice rolls in your role-playing games, in your TTRPGs. Should you or should you not fudge the dice? And, okay, just to be clear, what fudging means is if somebody rolls a dice, especially usually the GM, they decide to arbitrarily re-roll the dice, change the dice, or alter the outcome of the dice in order to get whatever kind of outcome they're after. I've seen it used for all kinds of things, like the PCs managed to kill the boss in one round. I've seen it used to mitigate player deaths after opponents threw too many crits and killed them in one round. Various things like that. Now, I mean, this is just my opinion, but it's a very strong opinion, and it's I'm not the only one who thinks this, I'm pretty sure. But I don't believe in fudging dice. Just straight up. I think that it robs the GM and the players of a lot of agency. I mean, to put it simply, okay, when your PCs go out to adventure, there is an assumption of risk. Your guys could stay home. They could stay home farming. They could become fruit sellers in the marketplace. They could literally involve themselves in any other profession that is available to them in the game. But for whatever reason, they decided they were going to take up the sword and go out and do stuff, either for other people or for themselves. And that involves risk. So, with that risk comes the, inevitability that at some point you're probably going to die. And, you know, if it just so happens the very first adventure you go out on and, you know, your first level, you and your party, and you run into a dungeon and the first encounter kills you because of a lucky crit, that's what happens. I mean, you know, just speaking from a realistic point of view, human beings are very fragile creatures. You know, it only takes 3 inches of penetration anywhere along the median of the body in order to kill us, or at least inflict a mortal wound. So, the concept of having a lucky crit, even by something as innocuous as, let's say, a pseudo-dragon or something that only does 1 hit point of damage with its sting, is possible. You know? And that's the thing. If you start fudging dice, what you're showing your players is, one, that you're not willing to stand behind your dice rolls. And if you're not willing to stand behind your dice rolls, you're not willing to stand behind their dice rolls. Good, bad, whatever. And the other part of that, of course, is if you're being dishonest in your game, you know, why should they trust you to run a good game? Now, stuff you can do to mitigate it. Let's say you do have a bad dice roll and somebody gets critted, gets dead. Okay, that's unfortunate. This is the same situation, though, that happens when you have TPKs, total party kills. Everybody dies, a player dies, etc., etc. Death is not the end of the world, guys. TTRPGs, you know, people die all the time. You know, whether or not it's your players killing them or your players getting killed. I should say your PCs, not your players. Your players are running the PCs. But the deal is, you know, PCs die all the time. It happens. And that doesn't mean it's a failure on their part. It might mean a lack of planning. It might mean that, you know, a bad guy's ambush was so well crafted that, you know, that death was the inevitable outcome. But, you know, there's nothing in life is fair. And why should it be in a game either? This whole setup system of, you know, challenge ratings and everything like that, I think is very disingenuous. And player death is as likely to happen at a low level as it is at a high level. It's a little less likely to happen at a high level just because of the amount of hit points involved, but still, it happens. So here's the thing. Let's say your lucky dice roll, you kill a character. Whoop-de-doo. Even if it's a first level. Oh gosh, well, this guy spent 2 hours writing up his backstory in super-duper detail on his fighter. Okay, so maybe he should have thought about that before he rushed the combat ahead of everybody else and got into close combat with a bunch of critters that could kill him at first level, knowing that he only had 14 hit points. I don't know. You know? I mean, it just sounds like a recipe for, you know, I'm getting my ass kicked. Even if you're just using average damages, your guy's going down pretty quick, depending on how fast he can take down the opposition. D&D 5th edition has a lot of stuff to mitigate damage and encounters anyway. So the players have lots and lots of tools in their toolbox to help circumvent stuff like this to begin with. So I don't really feel sorry for players who get themselves killed in 5th edition. But okay, let's talk about what you do when it happens. As a GM, you have options, okay? Rather than going and saying, you would have died, I'm just going to take that crit back and we'll just say you're, you know, we'll just call them regular hits. Or you're just reduced to 0 hit points and now you have to make death saves. I'm like, no. Your character died. That's unfortunate. Here's what we do. One, as a GM, you could introduce an NPC who will offer to resurrect that character for a fee, usually, which is another quest. So you can use this to branch off into somewhere else. You could, of course, have the PCs, love that guy so much that they are willing to go out and quest to find a way to get this guy resurrected. And generally speaking, that's not all that hard. Adventurers tend to bring home a lot more money than the average person, Now, the only real hardship is the poor guy who's dead. What is he going to do for the rest of the game session? Okay, well, there's options. First off, there's a reason why most GMs will tell everybody, hey, always have a backup character ready. Because shit happens. But the other part of it, too, is you could always say, okay, well, these kobolds who killed your friend had a holding pen right there where they were keeping somebody chained up. And bring in an NPC that the player can play for the duration of the game until they get their character brought back. There's lots of options you got. You could even go as far as to go crazy divine on it and just say, we used to have this kind of Deus Ex Machina for when shit got all fucked up in games. It was called a DI roll, a divine intervention roll. You'd basically roll 100-sided dice, and if you got double odds, you're actually the way it was done is your level was subtracted from the dice, or was added to the dice roll, and your object was to hit 100. So, like, if you were level 1, you had to hit a 99 or a 100. But the thing is, you would your deity would intervene on your behalf, and either raise your character from the dead or somehow stop whatever it is from happening, and that gives you some divine player agency there too. Which that's pretty wacky, but it works every once in a while. It's kind of like a counter to some really bad dice rolling. You could even be straightforward as like, okay, yeah, you after the rest of the party dispatches the rest of the kobolds, it just so happens that, part of their lair treasure or whatever is a scroll of resurrection. It's that simple, guys. Players die. You should say PCs die, characters die. It happens. Don't fudge your fucking dice rolls. Don't do it. Stand by your fucking dice rolls. It doesn't matter how bad they land. It doesn't matter if they're having a bad night, whatever. I'll tell you one thing for sure. We use a crit and fumble system in my games, and we have had more fun because of fumbles than anything else. Because the fumbles can be hilarious to the point where your GM can completely relook a situation. It's like one of our players had a fumble against a major opponent, and the fumble was basically that he stabbed himself in the foot and starts hopping around on it, and he looked like he's dancing for that entire round while he tries to regain his composure. The bad guys all basically stopped, stared at this PC dancing for an entire round, and it completely changed the outcome of the battle, because it was like they were so busy laughing and everything like that they said, "This is too funny. You brought us a clown. So, for amusing us, we're going to let you go." But that's the thing, let the dice fall where they may. I don't know. What do you think, Grim?
I think it depends. Being a filthy centrist, that's obviously going to be my answer. Sometimes a bad die roll can completely throw off the vibe of what you've got going in the game. So I think in some games, if you've got a goal that's more narrative focused, then dice fudging would be how you would keep that vibe going and compensate a little bit for any disasters. But that's only suited for some games. Other games, you want the risk to be there. You want the potential for bad luck to be there. After all, you don't ignore the players' critical rolls, right? Those always count. So why shouldn't the bad guys count? If a character dies early in a campaign, you really haven't lost that much. Even if you've written a huge backstory, you haven't gotten to play the character for very long. And so it's quite replaceable. And there are even ways you can do it with the same background. It's like, you leave the dungeon later on, and the brother of your dead party mate is there.
Exact identical twin brother.
Yes, I was supposed to meet my brother here. Oh, I'm sorry. He died, Megolas. Why don't you join our party instead? All of these things are a bit of a blag, but not as much as just fudging the roll straight up in front of everyone. I mean, if you do all your rolls secretly, then you've got a lot more scope for fudging. Playing more old school games, I think it's pretty much let the dice drop where they might. Like you say, it does lead to memorable situations, both crits and fumbles. I think I told the story before about the character who was this grizzled guardsman. First encounter, goblin stabbed out one eye and then got another crit and stabbed out the other eye in the following turn. So if it hadn't been a one shot, maybe he could have trained to become a blind swords master or something, which would have been cool. But that was a one shot, and I was just desperately unlucky. In that same game, there was a dwarf warrior character who got blasted with venom from a hydra and almost killed. Like, all his stats were dropped really low. But then, so he decided he wanted to play his character going for an honorable death. So he would charge, kind of wheeze and shuffle into combat constantly and try and take on opponents that were way too harsh for him. But for the entire rest of the game, he kept getting crits and he just couldn't die. So... Yeah, that's funny as well. You got one bad roll at the start, and then the rest of the game, despite wanting to die and replace his character, he just couldn't. As Jim says, you can get people captured as well. Mm-hmm. Maybe you'd rather be killed if you're playing your game based off Goblin Slayer or something. But yeah, there's all these other options, and it's not the end of the world when a character dies. In most games, there's some form of resurrection. You can go on a pilgrimage, or it can lead to another quest, or whatever else. One other thing you can do is a lot of classes have familiars or pets, and you can have the player has lost their character, play the familiar or the pet until the adventure is over, and that way they're not stuck doing nothing, twiddling their thumbs.
And speaking of familiars and pets, I do have a funny crit story. There was a time when I actually played a pseudo dragon as a character in one of my friend's dungeons. It had levels, but its main thing was it had its little tail, but it was also classed as a rogue. So you're looking at a pseudo dragon with rogue levels. So basically, you could do a sneak attack. Now in the game, the tail only does 1 hit point of damage if it hits, and plus there's a poison save. Well, I got lucky and landed a 4 times crit on somebody with a sneak attack on top of it. So, yeah, I ended up basically, the way the GM described it is, okay, your pseudo dragon, stings the guy, the barb goes directly through the kidneys and ruptures them, and the guy dies instantly in agony because the guard only had like 12 hit points, and it's like I one-shotted him with a pseudo dragon.
Maybe he was allergic to pseudo dragon venom.
Yeah, that's what we're guessing. I mean, I was just planning on knocking the guy unconscious. So this guy, like, whoops.
Need a potion of EpiPen.
There you go. Could somebody get the bee sting anti-venom for this guy? All right. Have you got your video set up?
Yes.
All right. We're going to show this guy. Guys, this is Grimm's new campaign for Wightchester, which I'm very excited about it. So we will add this to the stream. And there you go. You got the floor there. Okay. Ooh, sound is really low. Can you crank the sound a little bit?
It's at max.
Uh-oh. Oh, well.
Got no sound?
I got very little sound. Weird. Oh, well. Anyway, we've got links to the Indiegogo where Grim is putting his new product out on the description of this video, so be sure and check it out, because I've already talked to Grim about this setting a little bit, and it's really cool. I mean, it's an entire walled-off city of the undead, and you are a prisoner being thrown into it. Or a convict, I should say.
Yeah. Might be guilty, might not. That's up to you.
Mm-hmm. And I like the fact that it is going to be compatible with so many systems.
Well, if we reach the stretch goals. So, yeah, there's a ways to go yet. It'll be about 500 pages.
Nice. I'm excited about it. Of course, I'm always excited about stuff that you put out anyway. I mean, that's why you're my code host. So, all right. Well, all right. I'm going to turn the floor over to our chat. What questions do you guys have for us? Because today is a Q&A thing. I figured there's a lot of stuff that we haven't covered, haven't thought of. Maybe there's something that we need to address or something you'd like addressed. I mean, go for it. Let's see what you guys got.
Well, Jack asked where babies come from in this game.
Well, that's interesting. You see, depending on the race... and this is a rabbit hole I'm willing to jump down while the chat formulates some questions for us. Okay. I have recently seen a GM who posts what is the new word that they're using? Lineages or something instead of race?
Something like that.
Yeah. Or heritage or whatever the hell. Okay, I don't truck with that. That's dumb. Because if you're talking about humanity as a single entity, as a whole, yeah, we are all the same race. It doesn't matter what our color is. We have different ethnicities, and certainly we all look different depending on where you come from. But we're all fundamentally the same race. Somebody
race and species used to be synonyms.
Mm-hmm. But apparently now they're making this thing. They don't want to put race into the game, so now they're using other words like heritage, lineage, whatever. And that's kind of dumb. It's misleading because by doing that, you're kind of saying, okay, well, this merman or this triton, this completely aquatic elemental species, apparently is an offshoot of humans. No. And their physiology is compatible with humans? No. That's not possible. I already thought that the half orc, half elf debacle was a little bit problematic because it was kind of like you have these two species that are distinctly disseparate from humans in many, many ways. And somehow they're able to breed or crossbreed between themselves and humans. I'm kind of like, there has to be some magic involved in that because it's, you can't get a bird to mate with a scorpion and expect it to produce offspring, even though both species lay eggs. It just doesn't happen.
Yeah, I think the best approach is species. I don't know why they haven't just gone for species. And then maybe the demi-humans, as it used to be called, maybe they are different branches of humanity that are speciating, which would mean that half-dwarves, moles, and half-elves might be like mules. So they can't reproduce themselves, but you can get crossbreeds of those things. But then something like a goblinoid is a whole different hominid species.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe because we've got the established background of half orcs, maybe they are an offshoot, but from further back. You could take the Star Trek approach, where technology does allow for crossbreeding. In our case, it's magic, but there's still all kinds of medical problems, like they were with the half Vulcan child in Enterprise, I think, and like there were with half Klingons, had various issues at various times. But at Star Trek, they have an explanation in that there is an ancient species that seeded all these planets with their offspring, which then deviated in various different ways. You don't really have that in a fantasy game. These things are created by the gods, so to what extent they can interbreed, whatever, really depends on the setting and the metaphysics of the setting, I guess. So.
Yeah, and how ridiculous you want to go with it. I mean, do you want to have like gnolls able to breed true with humans and stuff?
Yeah, but the fuss about all of this is just absurd. I watched the beginning of a video someone did that was trying to be very academic about bioessentialism and things, and trying to apply it to fantasy races. It's like, okay, can we admit that, say, a bear and a rabbit have different physiology and different instincts? And if we made them into sapient species, wouldn't they still have different capabilities and different instincts? And so what is the block to applying that to vaguely humanoid sapient species? We could look at something even closer to home, like if you gave a gorilla sapience, it would still have different instincts and different physical capabilities to humans. So it's just a false comparison, and the premises behind the discussion are all off right from the start, even before you bring in magic and metaphysics and gods and divine creation and all the rest of it that goes along with fantasy gaming.
Yeah, I mean, if you want a game where all of the different species can breed true, that's fine. But from a strictly scientific point of view, something with a structure as fundamentally different as, like, say, a dragonborn. I mean, they lay eggs, right? Yeah. So it's like, how is that supposed to be able to breed true with anything other than another dragonborn?
Yeah. But then, John Carter's missus, Deja Torres, she laid eggs. So
yeah, that's some pretty wild stuff there too. Yeah. I don't know. But I don't buy the whole, heritages or whatever the hell their term that they're trying to move into. And I suspect 6th edition D&D, which, yes, folks, it is coming. They haven't announced it, but it is coming.
Yeah, it's over the normal cycle time at this point.
But when they put out 6th edition, that they will probably not have race as a term. It'll probably be lineage or heritage or whatever the hell PC term they want to use.
Yeah. I wouldn't have thought that they'll announce it until after the pandemic is pretty much over in Europe and North America, and then they'll announce it at Gen Con, whichever one's closest after that seems most likely. Because at the moment they're selling a lot because a lot of people are still at home or out of work or whatever else. But when the pandemic ends, that boom will be over, and the best way to make money out of role-playing games is to put out a new edition of your game.
Publish or die.
Yep.
Okay, well, all right. So we have a few questions in the chat. We'll start off with Jack of Casuals. Where to start playing D&D for a newbie like me? Okay. Where to start? If you don't have a friendly local gaming store, which I would say that would be your first place to check, is go check out your friendly local gaming store. Ask them if they have any groups who are available. Talk to people, interact.
Most people will be welcoming to newbies. They'll be evangelical. They'll be beating down the door to get you into their game, most likely. So,
because most people love new players. It's a chance to introduce them to their hobby and the thing that they love the most. So, check your friendly local gaming store first, and if you perhaps live in a town that doesn't have one, certainly there will be one nearby or in another town or something. You can always check online. There's like Roll20 and all these other places that you can check for online games. Yeah, you have options. And you don't necessarily have to start playing D&D. D&D is just very easily accessible. So, it's the most commonly played role-playing game for new people, but it is not by and large the only one that you can do. There are lots of other good systems out there. So,
yeah. Other role-playing games are available.
Yeah. For example, I just yesterday got Old School Essentials, which is I really love that book. That is a well laid out, well made book. I also got Beta Red, which is a cyberpunk RPG. So, yeah, don't just necessarily fall down the D&D rabbit hole.
Yeah. What else is likely to be on offer at game stores and things? D&D, obviously, probably Pathfinder.
Mm-hmm.
Cyberpunk Red is pretty hot at the moment. Call of Cthulhu's
Shadowrun.
Shadowrun, maybe. Yeah, there's lots of options.
Vampire.
Yeah, it's
to a lesser degree. Yeah. Yeah, you have options. And do a little bit of research too. See what you like and look for it. See, Wizard Jim says elves are no more different from humans than Neanderthals. Are just a gracile human hominid. I mean, just because it stands up on two legs and walks and talks, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's species compatible. Gorillas can walk upright and vocalize and stuff too, but I don't see anybody rushing to have sex with them.
Elves have night vision. They, in some versions, are taller, in some they're shorter. Mm-hmm. So there's considerable physical morphology changes, and they have massively long lives, all of which are things that are pretty different to baseline humans.
Mm-hmm.
If you think about it, they should look more like bush babies.
Jack Allcatcher says, is the merman top fish bottom human or top human bottom fish? Usually they're top human bottom fish, in the case of tritons. But.
Well, mermaids are usually top human, bottom fish. Tritons are kind of half fish all over. They're more like deep ones or something like that.
Yeah. Okay, Kit Marlowe. Hey, thank you for joining us today. Vancian Magic, elegant, clunky, the advantage of structure at the expense of mystery. Okay, I'm going to say clunky because I've never been crazy about the Vancian Magic system. I honestly think that we should have moved past this a long time ago, but for some reason we're still churning it out all these years later. And I don't know if that's just some kind of adherence to the old form, or maybe somebody really loves Jack Vance and they want to keep his legacy alive by continuing to produce games with Vancian magic systems. I have seen two magic systems that do it better. The first one is Lamentations of the Flame Princess, where he allows you to cast any single spell you know. It doesn't matter what it is, and it's at first level. The only difference is whatever the effect is relevant to whatever level you have. So there is no fireball in Lamentations, but let's say if you had a fireball at first level, you'd still only be throwing a D6 fireball because it's only one dice. The other system, and this is something my producer has come up with, is a mana system. Whereas a wizard has a certain amount of mana points, or a cleric has a certain number of mana points, and you expend that in order to cast spells. Which kind of makes, the classes play a little bit all like sorcerers to an extent. but it does provide for some good, some interesting gaming. Of course, he also introduces rolling for spells too, so you have the possibility of a spell critting or fumbling. That's pretty wild. What are your thoughts, Grim?
You're crackling again, so you might want to fiddle with your mic. I'm not a fan of Vancian Magic. I didn't read Jack Vance until after I'd begun my role-playing career. And so I guess I kind of, in a roundabout way, learned about Vancian Magic from Discworld, because when Rincewind memorizes one of the great 8 spells, that's stuck in his brain, and that's where that idea comes from. In 5th edition D&D, they've streamlined and smoothed out and made simpler a lot of things, but Magic is not one of those. Which is why I think we see so many kind of add-on things like spell cards and so on for 5th edition. And even though really the wizard is the only one that does Vancian Magic, the Vancian Magic distorts and changes the way you play with all magic in the game. But then if you make it more of a mana system, which is what I would prefer, like you have a number of spell points in place of slots. So if you have, if you currently have a level 6 slot, that would be 6 magic points, and then you can spend those on whatever spells you happen to know. That's what I would prefer. But then you take away the kind of uniqueness of the sorcerer and the uniqueness of the wizard, both. I think it's one of those sacred cows of D&D, but it's one that I would feel far more comfortable sorting out than I would any of the things that they have been changing that were sacred cows, like race and so on. Changing the Vancian Magic for them, I think, would be like changing hit points. It's just, or changing from a class and level to a skill-based system. I just don't think it's something they're probably ever going to do. But it does needlessly complicate things, having so many different subsystems for Magic. And I know that's something that all my D&D groups have struggled with, just because there's so much bookkeeping involved in spells. What spells do I know? What spells do I have prepared? How many have I used? Did I use slots, or did I expend the spell? Or, what's going on here? Oh, meta magic. Forgot about meta magic. It's a mess. So I'm not a fan, but I appreciate why people are, and I understand why it's such a sacred cow for D&D. But then so was alignment. So
yeah. And we have talked about that previously too. Let's see. Jack of Casuals, I'll be kidnapped. Oh, yeah. If your store is very cool, they might play WFRP. Yeah. Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay doesn't get enough love. And there is a 4th edition, and they have been releasing the redone Enemy Within campaign, which is fucking cool. So,
character creation can get a little bit complicated in WFRP because of the way the career paths and so on work, but that's probably a pretty good starting RPG because it works on percentiles, and most people have a good grasp of what a 30% chance of doing something is. So that's a good one to start playing. Perhaps controversially, I would suggest not starting with D&D. Play any other game, so that you don't get stuck in the D&D pit trap, unable to escape to experience any other game. I think it's a good idea to get a wide variety of different gaming experience. The people who only ever play D&D are like the console owners who only ever buy FIFA once a year.
There's probably a whole set of English hooligans out there that do that. But
yeah. I don't know what the equivalent is for American football. I know there is one.
Madden.
Yeah, Madden.
Buy Madden every year.
Yeah, and nothing else. Maybe Call of Duty.
Yeah, Call of Duty.
Yeah.
Let's see. Vancian Magic rules. Spells are brain ferrets. Spell books are meaningless or menageries. Yeah, maybe so. Madden 2K. Yeah. Oh gosh, I had a thought, and it just chased itself from my brain.
I was just thinking there hasn't really been a sport RPG. There have been sport board games like Blood Bowl, but nothing.
A few people have released pro wrestling RPGs.
Oh, that hardly counts.
Come on now. I think stuff like that's fun. Depending on how detailed the grappling system is, it could be really interesting.
I doubt there's an untapped market for something like playing a football team or something, But there's cartoons and things of it, so maybe there is. But I just don't think they'd get into the role playing side.
Yeah, I was kind of shocked because CMON actually released a Wacky Racers tabletop tabletop board game a couple years ago, and I thought this is the dumbest fucking license in the entire world. But apparently, it successfully funded on Kickstarter, and people are buying it. So I'm like, okay, well, what do I know? Kit Marlowe, and in 4th edition. Enemy within campaign, they still haven't resolved the stupid of severely limiting starting character's ability to read while having most of the clues notes. Yeah, that's true.
That's why you hire a scribe to go along with you.
Yeah.
And then if you're mean to him, the GM lies to you about what he's reading.
Oi, what's he saying? What's it say? Come on. Read the words.
It says take the left-hand path. The pit trap is an illusion.
Just walk right over it. It's not a problem.
Yes, it'll be fine.
A board sports RPG in this age, you better have a better chance of finding a unicorn. But there is a unicorn role-playing game. Because what do you call it? The My Little Pony role-playing game, the Friendship is Magic role-playing game does exist. So, I don't know.
I'd rather find a Unicron game.
Oh, that would be interesting, yeah. And speaking of Unicron games, one game I will stump for because I'm actively DMing it right now is Godbound, which came out a few years ago, so it's not a new system. And there hasn't been a whole lot of books written for it. But if you get the deluxe edition, and I highly recommend you do, it has really good systems in place for running common mortal characters, heroic characters, and gods or demigods as regular characters in a game. And it is OSR, so you've got your usual stats. The skill system is kind of non-existent. Instead of a bunch of skills and stuff like that, you're actually going to roll against your stats to determine everything. So it's a lot more common sense. What I really like about Godbound is the fact that it really fits my style of GMing, which is I like sandbox, freeform, open-ended, let's come to the table and let's make some shit up and have a good time. The rules are not overly complicated. And the players, I mean, if you choose to let everybody at the table play Godbound, they literally play demigods who are building themselves and their legacy from level 1 up. And it already has a built-in system for not having, players just sit around and do nothing. Because in order to build up your levels, you have to go out and expend Dominion points, which is your way of making things happen in the world in a permanent fashion. Like, let's say if your character is like a god of the sword, well, one of the things you might want to do is expend a Dominion point and either create a legendary battle site or a legendary school of swordplay that's dedicated to the worship of your character. And in so doing, they ensure that their name is being spoken and that they're being revered by people in a permanent way until they're affected by another god. But your characters really are gods. They're so powerful. It's like, for one thing, they don't hit people in their hit points. All the Godbound, when they hit people, it is all the damage is subtracted from their hit dice. So you can imagine what happens. You have a giant pack of orcs, let's say 20 strong. First level Godbound can take them all down because he can expend enough hit dice worth of damage that he can kill most of them in 1 or 2 hits. Yeah.
Sounds like it would handle Exalted better than Exalted.
It does. It handles Exalted better than Exalted. You really do get the feeling of... one of my producer and I, actually, we've played it, and he says it's kind of like playing a super-powered role-playing game in a fantasy world. And I said, yeah, but it doesn't necessarily have to be fantasy. It can be post-apocalyptic. It can be whatever you really want it to be. Let's say
demigods like Hercules or
Achilles. Yeah. As a matter of fact, I actually thought about that for my next campaign of Godbound, is doing like the Olympic/Greek mythology heroes, because you can have people of different power levels running in the same party. You would have Hercules, who is a Godbound, and then you'd have someone like, let's say, Perseus, who does not have any godly powers, but he is a hero. And your heroes do stand apart from your regular average mortals in that heroes are considered a worthy challenge to Godbound. Therefore, you don't hit their hit dice. You still have to take away their hit points. In other words, they're capable of defeating the gods.
Plus, Hercules is a bit of a thickie, so, a normal mortal might be able to stand up to him. Yes, Thoth, I'm doing... Well, it's an Indiegogo and not a Kickstarter for my fantasy early modern horror setting.
And I'm reposting the link for you, Lord Thoth. And welcome, Lord Thoth. It's good to see you again. Let's see. Wizard Jim says, I'd rather like to see a sci-fi RPG in the vein of the culture novels. Sci-fi, real politic and culture clashes with an insane tech level. Yeah. Something like that would be cool.
Need more of a narrative-based game again there for that. So I would have to recommend one of the Fate derivatives like Star Blazer Adventures for something on that scale, because the technology is just so overwhelming that you don't really need rules for it. So that's one way to go about it. DreamPod 9 did, before they realigned everything, they did a overpowered sci-fi game. What was it called? Heavy Gear was good. Jovian Wars was good.
Yeah. Those were good.
Core Command, that was the one. Yeah.
Now, one game that was endlessly complicated, but still lots of fun to play was Twilight 2000 back in the day.
Yeah, there's talk of a new edition coming out. From is it Swedish RPG company?
Modifius?
No. They'll probably distribute it.
Kit Marlowe says the old Amber Diceless system was a clever way of doing superpowers without the crunch. It was republished with a few tweaks as Lords of Gossamer and Shadow a few years ago. Yeah. I remember Amber Diceless from way back in the day, and I actually never got to play it, but my producer got to play it, and his opinion of it was that it was kind of ridiculous. That, you just made up whatever the hell you wanted to happen, and it just kind of happened.
It's
with no systems.
It's Free League doing the new version of Twilight 2000.
Free League?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that would be... I'm kind of interested in seeing that. One of the things I liked about the old Twilight 2000 was how in-depth all the mechanics of, let's say, weaponry and gear and skills and everything got. I don't know. I'd kind of like to see that redone. And they had a sister system that was very good too, which the name escapes me at the moment, but I think it was Dark something or other. But that was fun.
Yeah, they're going to be using Year Zero engine, which was used in Alien, Tales from the Loop, Forbidden Lands, and Mutant Year Zero. Yeah, I don't know if that's a great idea.
Is that the one where you get the stress dice?
It's D6s.
Yeah.
I can't remember too much specifically about the system offhand, but the thing is, right, the people who were into the old Games Designers Workshop games, like Traveller, like Twilight 2000, they like their twiddly fiddly bits and the sort of technical kind of simulationist way of doing things. So I don't think a more narrative-based, simplistic system is going to scratch that itch for a lot of grognards, the old fans of these games. So it's. I don't think it's going to fulfill the nostalgia quotient for those guys.
Yeah, that was definitely one of the things I liked about it, and I consider myself a grognard. So, yeah. Lord Thoth says I like math. Yeah, pretty much. That's one thing that that games like that would teach you is math. I remember Rollmaster was pretty notorious because they're like arms law, spell law, claw law, all that stuff. Their hit tables and crit tables were just so deep. It's kind of like the only problem is it could take forever to run a combat.
Yeah, unless you simplified it. I think in later editions they had a simplified table that just said, "Oh, you do this much better in general if you get a roll," which is kind of a waste because those crit tables, if you do use them, are fantastic.
They are. They were so in depth and detailed.
GTW was frustrating with their systems because, like in Traveller, there was this massive system that just about held up to reality in terms of reaction mass and weight and displacement and all these things to do with your spaceships. But then the system itself was just 2d6, so there wasn't granularity in the system to go along with the design.
Oh, let's see. Lord Thoth says I had a buddy who would run only Rollmaster. It took several hours to make a character to die in the first. Yeah, that's true. Another good system like that was Traveller, the old Traveller game, where you literally had to go through a series of tables and stuff in order to create your character, and it was super duper in depth. Yeah, and you could die during it. And the reason is the creators, they said, okay, we're making the character creation system like this much fun because there's going to be nights when you don't have anybody to role play with. So we're kind of simulating a role playing experience in character creation.
Yeah,
which is a good idea, I thought. Although you could really get some very overpowered characters to start with.
Yeah, that's the thing. You ended up with a party of like 60 and 70-year-old veterans.
Yeah, with full armadas and everything under their control.
Yeah. What Kit says about the Year Zero engine, that's a problem with a lot of narrative systems. They just don't have the granularity for satisfying character advancement. So...
Traveller was the same, but a lot of fun. Space is not fun without a suit. Yeah, no, it's not. And I've seen various iterations of Traveller since the original small black books, which is how I grew up with it. And I've never seen it done very well. They came with the D20 version of it too, and most of us just kind of like, yeah.
I'm a bit of a freak because I like the New Era version. Largely because of Fire Fusion and Steel, which you could use to make just about anything to plug into the game, even if the final stats weren't particularly satisfying.
Could always plug Torg again. Never going to stop plugging Torg, but that was an easy one to get into, and it's still easy to play, even with some of the new rules complications. But that's a good one to start with too.
Yeah, lots of people don't like New Era. I don't know why. I thought it had the most comprehensible and streamlined rules. I think it's the background that people didn't like, the virus fleets and things like that.
I did manage to play one game of the new Alien role-playing game that came out like a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
I I did not like it. Maybe part of the reason is because, we were assigned pre-gens, and I don't like pre-gens. I could go into a whole rant about pre-gens and how they suck. I'm just going to say GMs, always let your people build characters so that they can get invested in them, because pre-gens, there tends to be a disconnect, because it's kind of like, well, I didn't make this character, so, I don't give a shit what happens to it. Oh, look, there's a vat of acid. I think I'll go walk my character into it and fuck with it.
Sometimes they're a necessity, convention games and things.
Yeah. But generally speaking, I don't like pre-gens. But that notwithstanding, I did not like the Aliens role-playing game. You use D6s to determine everything, but depending on the things that you run into, you get what's called a stress dice. And your stress dice, if it comes up, can give you successes, but in a negative way, kind of like the vampires' bloodlust dice that they have in the new 5th edition vampire. And it seems like you get stress dice for everything. Oh, you saw a corpse, stress dice. Oh, you saw the shadow of an alien, stress dice. Oh, you watched somebody else get brutally murdered in front of you, stress dice. I mean, it's just like your characters end up with tons and tons of stress dice. It's kind of like, yeah, eventually you're going to roll some fucked up shit because you have so many stress dice. I mean, yeah, your chances of doing things get better at the cost of something. You're going to do something that's going to terminally fuck things up. And I don't appreciate systems like that. I don't like it. I guess it's their way of trying to simulate horror in a role-playing game in a mechanical sense.
Yeah, that's always tricky.
Yeah.
So Thoth brought up Call of Cthulhu.
Mm-hmm.
So the sanity system is nice in its way, and it was kind of breaking new ground at the time. But the trouble with fear and insanity in games is that it always entails taking agency away from the player. You're afraid, all you can do is run away. Well, it's not very satisfying. Mm-mm. Or and sometimes there were random tables for madness. They don't always make sense. You've seen Cthulhu, and because we're using an old and politically incorrect version of the game, you are now a transvestite. But what does that have to do with seeing a terrifying squid monster? I don't know. That's what we rolled. So what I've tended towards now is to have rules that do say that you go into a panic or you go mad, but let the player determine in what way their character reacts to fear, or where their psychology is most likely to fracture. So the player still has a bit of agency, and I have them do that at the start of the game before they run into anything. So if they've decided that, okay, when I get terrified, I blindly attack whatever it is that's scaring me, like some cheesy people might do. That's not so great if you come up against something that they can't hurt, or that massively outmatches them, in which case going into a blind, fearful rage is not really gonna help them. It works even better with madness, I think, because people do get invested in their characters. They do come up with backgrounds. So if I see something that completely breaks my model of reality, then I take on an addiction to counter it, they might say, or self-harm or disassociation, things like that, so that they can choose beforehand. That lets them retain some agency.
Yeah, I mean, even alcoholism, in order to cope with the shit that they've seen, to calm their nerves.
Yeah,
makes total sense.
Mechanisms. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yes, Jack of all casuals, I would agree. The closest video game to these types of games is Darkest Dungeon. Yeah, Darkest Dungeons is really good about that, because the horror that you encounter in Darkest Dungeons will fuck your characters up in really interesting ways. And yeah, they'll have to spend time in the sanitarium to get fixed. But yeah, Darkest Dungeon is really fun. It's hard as fuck, but yes.
Eternal Darkness on GameCube also did it really well.
I hadn't played that one.
So the game starts fucking with you. So as you get more and more insane, the world around you changes. Like one time you'll enter a room and all the furniture will be on the ceiling, or the colors will shift, or it suddenly pops into your save menu and deletes your saves, or at least appears to. But doesn't.
I like
or the
that.
Controls reverse. Yeah, things like that. So
yeah,
that handles it very well.
Yeah, if there was a way to do that with a TTRPG, I would definitely love it. I mean, I guess you could. I mean, just by the GM describing things, it's like, your character sees this, everybody else sees this.
Yeah, and you can build up tension and aspects of that by passing people blank notes that just say read this and frown very seriously. Yeah, it's you can turn your GMing into an unreliable narrator where they can't trust what you're describing to them, and you can create a sense of paranoia and distrust by passing notes to players.
Yeah, I don't know. I think insanity is probably handled a little bit better than fear mechanics in most games anyway. Just because insanity is something you can govern more easily. Yeah,
and insanity doesn't tend to stop you making actions or playing. It tends to just cause aberrant behaviors and things which the player can pick up on and do. So
yeah, and some of them can really lead to some interesting stories, such as your guy burning down the town.
Burn them all.
We saved your town. Now we're going to burn it to the ground. Thank you very much. Yeah. All right. Well, we're at an hour, so I think it's going to about wrap it up for today. Thank you all for your Q&A questions. And next week is going to be... Oh, should I announce this or not? This is going to be the last episode of our season of Dungeons and Discussions. So we're going to go on a hiatus for about 9 months. But don't worry, we're planning on having a Thanksgiving episode, a Christmas episode, a spring break episode, something like that. So we'll pop in during the year. But next week, we'll try to have something really awesome for you and, make it a memorable finale. I don't know. Maybe I can actually get Grim to stay for 2 hours, but I don't know. But I won't push it.
Yeah, maybe.
All right. Y'all take care and have a great rest of your day. And thank y'all for being here.
Toodle pip.
Oh, and buy Grimm's game because it's good.
Yes, back my game. Drop the link in the chat again.
All right, I'll do it one more time for you guys. Furious typing sounds. There we go.
Root.
Look, a Dungeons and Dragons ride!